Welcome back to Deck Check. My name is Ganesh, and today we'll be checking out the top 16 decks of the Kaos Charity Tournament, a free-to-play event with 134 entrants. With no barrier to entry, we had a very unconventional top 16. Stick around and we'll break down these absolutely incredible top 16 decks. You won't want to miss it. Also, I did happen to win this tournament, and you can check out my final games linked below. Alright, let's get started. If you like this type of content, remember to like and subscribe. It's totally free. Also comment down below your favorite deck out of the top 16. As you can see here, we have a lot of spicy ones. So we'll start at 16th and work our way back to number 1 like usual. Let's get started with Heliod. Heliod is a creature-focused stacks combo deck. Heliod says whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature or enchantment you control. He can also give creatures lifelink, which combos with Walking Ballista to combo kill the entire table. So what you want to do is give Ballista lifelink, remove a counter from Ballista to ping someone, and then Heliod's triggered ability would put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you can repeat this process infinitely. Besides the combo, this list is running a large variety of stacks pieces like Aven Mind Sensor, Ether Sworn Canonist, Linvala, Grafdigger's Cage down here, and Damping Sphere. So a lot of anti-combo sort of things. There are also some really cool includes I haven't seen in Heliod yet. So for example, we have Gerard's Hourglass Pendant, which is like an anti-Tivit, Yuriko, Final Fortune sort of card. Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which of course would be insane in Tivit because you can kind of resurrect your Walking Ballista again. So if you get stopped, you just make something else with Walking Ballista and keep going. Some other really interesting choices I saw were Staff of Completion and Paladin class. So Staff is going to be right here. It has a few different abilities. I'm not 100% sure why this is there. I imagine it's actually very useful since in Heliod we're going to gain a lot of life, and tap and paying 4 life to draw a card isn't really much of a cost for our deck. And then Paladin class is just pretty interesting. It makes opponents' spells cost 1 more on our turn, but once you start leveling it up in a stacks game, this bottom ability is going to be extremely impactful because you're just going to start killing people. So yeah, that was Heliod. Let's move on to the next deck, Tymna Halana. So Tymna, of course, is going to draw us cards based on how many opponents we dealt combat damage to. And Halana is able to kill some of our opponent's creatures once we pay 2 mana when they enter the battlefield. This deck is another creature-focused stacks combo deck, but it's a bit less stacksy and more focused on Protean Hulk, which is not a card we see very often anymore. Protean Hulk says, when it dies, search your library for any number of creature cards with total converted mana cost 6 or less, and just put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So it's a really cool strategy. I really like it. So we're playing a few stacks pieces here and there, try to slow down our opponents. Like we have Ranger Captain, we have Oppo Agent, we have Rule of Lawflect on Archon of Emeria. And then we're going to also try to turbo out Protean Hulk ASAP, or we're going to try to grab a Boon Weaver Giant, which is right up here. So you can actually get this Boon Weaver Giant and you can put a aura on it right here, Pattern of Rebirth. So you can grab this Boon Weaver Giant, you can put this Pattern of Rebirth on it, you can kill your giant, and then you can go and you can fetch your very trusty Protean Hulk here, and then you go kill your Protean Hulk and you can just keep going. The way I understand it, the pile for this, and I could be wrong, but you want to get some sort of sacrifice outlet, and then you want to get Academy Rector, which will then go ahead and grab a Reanimate enchantment, Dance of the Dead or Animate Dead. That should bring back Protean Hulk, and then we kind of keep going through this line until we get 2 creatures that can keep bringing each other back from the battlefield, like Karmic Guide here and Safi Eriksdotter, and then we also want to get a drain effect, like Alas Elcor, and this will just infinitely drain the table, and all of your opponents will die. So very cool. Definitely recommend checking this deck out if you're interested in it at all, and I'm very happy something like this made top 16. Next up, we have Blue Farm, which I won't go too deep into, as we all know basically what its game plan is. We're going to draw cards with Tymna and Kraum, and then try to combo win. However, there were some really interesting includes in this deck worth taking a look at. This player is running Beseech the Mirror, which is an interesting choice. It isn't the best in a 4-color deck, especially, but it does make some sense in their list, as they are running One Ring and Supreme Verdict. So they have a few more 4-drop fetch targets, which makes sense. Another card you don't see too often in Blue Farm is Time Twister. Generally, Blue Farm doesn't want this card because it actually removes our graveyard, so it makes our breaches much worse. So yeah, not sure why this is in there over something like Windfall. The card we're seeing pop up more and more is Talion. You'll see this more throughout the top 16. Turns out this card is just really, really good. A very, very solid draw engine. And you should probably be putting it in your deck if you can. And also looks like we have Lavinia here to kind of slow down our opponents a bit. So a bit more of a different slant on Blue Farm than we normally see. All right, moving on to Urza. This is a very classic artifact focused blue control deck. So Urza has, when he ETBs, he makes a construct, gets bigger with each artifact you have, and then you can tap and untap artifact you control. You get a blue mana, and then for 5 mana you can shuffle your library and exile the top card, and you can play that until end of turn for free. So our goal here is to get Urza ASAP out just on the board, protect him. He's going to turn all of our artifacts into mana rocks regardless of what they are. It gives a lot of blue mana, and then we're going to try to combo out quickly with either a Hullbreaker Horror, which will let us keep infinitely bouncing our mana rocks, making infinite blue mana, or we can go for the stacks route and we can go for something like a Winter Orb or a Static Orb. If you don't know, these cards have been eroded. So this one actually says, as long as this is untapped, no player may untap more than one land during their untap phase. This becomes very, very broken with Urza, very backbreaking, because you can have your Urza out, and then when it gets to the player before you use end step, you just tap this down. So what happens is you're the only person untapping your lands, and no one else is. So this can be very, very brutal. There are a few cool new includes in here I don't really see very often. So, for example, Stern Scolding is one. It's a very narrow counterspell. You don't really see this too much, but it does make sense. This can hit Thoracle, it can hit Dockside, it can hit clones. So, actually is doing a lot right now in the meta, I think. Another interesting one is Redirect. Generally, we don't really want to play this effect at this mana cost, but in Urza, I think it actually makes a lot of sense. Not just countering something, but making something choose a new target for it can actually be very, very beneficial for us. So like if they have some sort of weird uncounterable spell, you can just change the target of it and make it do something else. Or you could maybe steal someone's Peer into the Abyss, stuff like that. Very cool. Last thing I wanted to kind of take a look at in this deck was the Reality Chip. So this is honestly very interesting. It's an artifact itself, so you can tap it for blue, and then you can equip it to a creature, and then you can play lands and cast spells just off the top of your library, which is very, very good in a control deck, because we can just keep ripping counter spells off the top and controlling the board down to a place where we can win. So yeah, very cool Urza deck. Next up, we have good old Kinnan. So Kinnan's ability is that he generates one more mana whenever he taps an on-land permanent for mana, and then he has an activated ability where we can look at the top 5 cards of our library and just put a creature from among them onto the battlefield. So this deck is either looking to make a lot of mana and start dumping it in this ability, or we're going to combo out with Freed from the Real and or Penman's Aura. So right here, just going to untap that Mana Dork infinitely, make us infinite mana. Also, we have Basalt, which is going to make us infinite colorless mana here. With Kinnan's ability, we get 4 mana, we pay 3 to untap it. And alternatively, we have his ability, so we can cheat out some big boys like Consecrated Sphinx, Hullbreaker Horror, Glenn and Lender's also a good one. Nyx Bloom is terrifying. So yeah, it looks like this list is definitely more combo focused. We don't see as many heavy hitters. I really only see 3 here that are huge creatures. There's a lot more tutors in this list than most Kinnan's lists also that I've noticed. And another really interesting card we see here is Machine God's Effigy. I have not seen this card in any deck yet. It says you may have it enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's an artifact and has tap, add blue. So this is kind of like a Phyrexian Metamorph effect. We're seeing more and more clones in the meta because there's really nothing better than playing a clone effect and just getting the best thing on the battlefield, whether it be a Dockside, whether it be a Tivit, whether it be an Atraxa. So it definitely makes a lot of sense to run this card, and at worst, this is a mana rock, which is good for Kinnan anyway. So very cool. Include props to this player for putting this in their deck. This is a very smart choice. On to Sisay, a very classic Legendary Matters control deck. So Sisay she gets +1/+1 for each color among other legendary permanents we have, and then we can pay 5 to search her library for a legendary permanent card with converted mana cost less than her power, and just put that onto the battlefield. Very, very powerful activated ability here. Our goal with this deck is to get out some sort of 5-color producing mana dork, like Faber Elder or Bloom Tender, and then we're going to tutor out a chain of legendary permanents, Sahili being one of them. And then once we have our mana dork producing 5 Wooburg mana, we're going to untap it a bunch, and then we're going to chain out Aminato, Nicol Bolas, and lastly down here, Oath of Teferi. And what this is going to do is this combo is basically let us activate our Planeswalker abilities infinite times, because these two will flicker each other, and you can just kind of draw through your deck with Nicol Bolas. So some cool includes here I have seen. So for one, we have Relic of Legends. Very interesting card, very good card, especially in Sisay because we are running so many legendaries. This card can generate us a ton of mana, especially on our combo turn when we are pulling out legendary creatures. We can make the legendary creatures we pull also tap for mana. So very cool. We also see this card in Dargo a bit, and we'll get to that later. Another interesting card I saw was Sakashima. I think this is fairly standard for the list, but again, another clone effect. Just again, clone effects are becoming so common in the meta, and what better effect to have in your deck than a legendary clone effect. Another niche card I kind of saw was Ruby Daring Tracker. You don't really see this in a lot of cEDH decks. A 2-mana mana dork with haste doesn't really matter that much, but this actually synergizes really well with Sisay because this pumps her power by 2. So you get a red and a green, and it's a mana dork, and it's actually not even a bad attacker as well, especially into a stacks out board. We also see Talion in this deck, to no one's surprise. It's a legendary, it's powerful, it's going to be in the deck. So on to another blue farm list. So this one looks a little bit different from the one we saw earlier. So this one's on Teferi, another silence effect. It's got a DRC, which is typically something we see in more turbo variants of blue farm, which this doesn't necessarily seem to be. I'm not 100% sure why this is in there, but DRC is just a very good standalone card. So nothing wrong with that. We also see Serra Ascendant here, a very powerful kind of anti-stacks sort of card in blue farm sometimes, and a very good Tymna attacker. Is also going to keep our life healthy for better Adnaz. And we have Talion again, which is very cool. And again, another card we're seeing pop up a lot. Here's a really spicy one. Shalai and Hallar, which has flying, vigilance at 3/3, and it's in Naya. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, Shalai and Hallar deals that much damage to target opponent. So there's another creature-focused combo deck. This has got definitely a lot less stacks than the other decks, and this is more focused on actually killing players with combat damage. So this commander actually goes infinite with this card, the Red Terror. So whenever you can have Shalai, just put any sort of +1/+1 counter on her, it will deal 1 damage to an opponent, and then this will get a +1/+1 counter, which will then deal damage to an opponent, and that just goes infinite there. So this is going to be our main win con. If that doesn't work out, the deck is going to fall back on good old beats with cards like Mana Gorger Hydra, getting absolutely huge very quickly. And Toski is going to reward us for being a combat-focused deck. We also have a few more stacks effects here, like Soulless Jailer, which we're seeing a lot. Shalai giving all of our stuff hexproof, and this also for protection. So yeah, very, very cool deck. I hope to see this in more tournaments. Definitely very interesting, and I'm very glad this made the top 16. On to Atraxa. So basically, she's got a lot of words, but when she ETBs, you're going to get a card of each type from the top 10. So like instant, sorcery, battle, creature, all that. So this deck's main win con is going to be Food Chain, which is down here, and Mist Holograven. So we're going to exile a creature we control. We get X+1 of that creature's mana, and then if we have Mist Holograven up here, right here, we can cast from exile, and this is going to net us infinite mana. Then we can start dumping that in Atraxa, and we will be able to draw our deck here. Cast her as many times as we want. So it's also on Teferi, Time Raveler, and Displacer Kitten. These two combo very nicely together. As long as you have a 0-drop artifact or anything that's free on the board, you can infinitely draw through your deck with this combo. It is also, of course, on Classic Thassa's Oracle. Just very good in general. Something interesting about this deck, though, is it's running Solitude and Subtlety, which is very interesting. It definitely makes sense. Atraxa is going to draw you a whole bunch of cards, and a lot of times you won't be able to play them because you're tapping out for Atraxa. So you want to be able to play stuff for free, and what better way to play spells for free than with these two Evoke Elementals. Yawgmoth's Will was also in this deck, which is certainly a very interesting include. It makes sense, though. We're not on Breach, so we don't actually have to have our cards remain in our graveyard. So definitely watch out for this card coming back maybe into the meta. It's been gone for a while. This list is also on Counterbalance, which is not something we see too much in Atraxa. It's a little unconventional, but it's certainly not bad. It's going to slow down our opponents. I'm not sure if I would run it, but it certainly will hamper the turbo players a lot. So, on to Nixilis. Here's a really cool one. Nixilis Captive Kingpin. This Rakdos Turbo Dex commander has flying, trample, and whenever your opponents lose exactly 1 life, put a +1/+1 counter on him and exile the top card of your library, which you can play till your next turn. So he's like a huge beater. He gets big very quickly, and he's also a draw engine in that he keeps exiling cards off your library you can play. So this deck is primarily looking to try to get out this card down here, Balsa Citadel. This will kind of just let us churn through our deck very quickly. Of course, we also have Underworld Breach, just a very strong card in general. I'm sure there's a few combos with this in our deck. But the kind of kingpin of the deck is going to be All Will Be One. This card goes infinite with our commander, because if we can just make opponent lose 1 life, you'll put a counter on Nixilis, and then exile the top card of your library. And then All Will Be One will deal damage again, 1 damage, and then which will put another +1/+1 counter on him, and this just goes off. Something you'll notice is you only have 100 cards in your library, and the opponent's total life pool is going to be 120. So this isn't too big of a deal. If we can't kill them with just this combo, we're going to be exiling a bunch of cards out of our deck, and we can just play all of those, so we can, once we have our entire deck available to us, we can win in really any other way. Like, for example, with Citadel and Sensei Divining Top and Aetherflux Reservoir. So very, very interesting Rakdos deck. Hope we see a few more Nixilises. I like this list a lot. And aside from that, just a very standard Rakdos Turbo list with a lot of fast mana, some interaction here. So, on to Ikra Kraum, a very different Kraum pairing from Blue Farm. So instead of Tymna, we're going to have Ikra. While similar in some aspects to regular Blue Farm, so it shares, Gamble, it shares Breach, it shares Thoracle, it shares Ad Nauseam. This list looks much more turbo focused, so we have Necropotence here, which is not something we typically see in Blue Farm. We also have Ad Nauseam, and we're also on Peer into the Abyss. Find it here. Here it is. So running all 3 of those cards is kind of a sign this deck is not wanting to sit there and play too much of the long game. With more ways to tutor out, so this deck's going to have more ways to tutor out Dockside, which is definitely going to make it more powerful. And it also has access to Culling Ritual, which can very easily power us into an Ad Naus or appear into the Abyss. So this deck is definitely learning more into Turbo, but it also has many of the staple cards that make Blue Farm so powerful. So definitely keep a lookout for this list. I feel like more people might start playing this just because it's a little unconventional, but it's still very, very powerful. Next up, we have another Atraxa list. It's fairly similar to the ones we had before, but no subtlety. We have a few more clone effects down here, and this one also had Time Twister. Atraxa definitely proved very popular in this tournament, and this is just a little bit of a variant from the one we saw before. Now onto the top 4 with Dargo Thrasios. So this teamer combo deck is looking to leverage Dargo's cost reduction ability. So he says an additional cost to cast a spell, you can sacrifice any number of artifacts and creatures. It costs 2 less to cast. So if we play Dargo and we get him pretty low and we sacrifice him, he's going to see himself be sacrificed, and the new Dargo is going to cost 2 additional more. So he's basically going to pay for his own command tax. And this is kind of where the deck gets its power. So either we're going to do that, we're going to try to plop Thrasios down, maybe draw through the mid game. Dargo is very, very good at powering these cards. So Life's Legacy is very good at that. It's also very good at powering Greater Good, just down here, because you're going to draw 7 and then discard 3. So a huge synergy with that. Yeah, this is definitely a Dockside deck. A lot of strategies are going to kind of be powered by Dockside, and just the amount of treasures he gives you and how much he reduces your commander's mana cost. This is also going to combo with Temur Sabertooth to give us infinite mana. Thrasios is going to serve as a very, very nice outlet for that infinite mana. And it's also a very powerful mid-game draw engine. It's going to pair nicely with our very trusty Seedborn Muse here. So Thrasios is definitely not a slouch in this list at all. Next up, we have a very spicy one, Kodama Sakashima. So primary game plan here is to just kind of get our commanders out. This is actually really interesting. So we're going to try to turbo out Kodama, and we're going to play Sakashima copying Kodama, and our game plan is going to try to win the same turn that we played both of these out. So the way we're going to do this is it's a bit complex, but whenever this enters as a copy of Kodama, you get a trigger where you can just put something down that's 6 or less because it's a copy of this. A little weird. So one of the ways we're going to win is with this card here. We can pay 1 and return a land we control and make a 1/1. The 1/1 will let us put a land back down, and we'll have like 2 triggers of this. So we can put the land back down, tap it for mana, use this ability again, and I don't think this goes mana infinite, but it can just kill our opponents, especially if we have this card here. Sunscorched Desert, if I can find it here. So we put the land down, we're going to bounce the land, we're going to have it ping someone, we're going to pay the mana, have it come back untapped again, and this is just going to kill the table as long as we have both of our commanders out and a bouncer. We can also do this with a draw engine. So for example, if we have AC, this is going to draw us a card whenever a land ETBs, and then we would need to pair that with something like Oboro, just down here. We can just pay a mana, bounce it, put it back down, float a mana, and this will just kind of draw through our deck. And then there's a few other really interesting ways this deck can win. There's this card here, and we can just kind of keep bouncing it and just drawing a bunch of cards, as well as this card down here, Coveted Jewel, which is going to actually, I'm not sure if this is on the list, but Coveted Jewel is a card you can run. So this card's very much about bouncy stuff, and this deck plays very well through stacks and control, because you only really need to cast like one spell, and the rest of it is all activated abilities. And unless people can kill your commanders, there's nothing anyone can do to stop you. It's actually really nuts. So this person came in 3rd place. Very, very cool deck. I definitely recommend checking out the primer, which I will link below. Now on to another Atraxa list. Again, fairly standard. We have the Teferi Kitten and the Food Chain combos. There wasn't too much too crazy. Again, we're on Talion. Again, we're on the clone effects here. So yeah, fairly standard. Very good. Atraxa definitely making a very big showing in this tournament. Lastly, we have myself in the 1st place in blue form. Again, I won't go too much over the deck. We know what's going on. I'm drawing cards. I'm comboing out. I'm playing my good cards. Not too much going on besides that. My deck is a bit slower than most. So I'm on some slower packages like Professional Facebreaker. And we're going to try to combo win with Thoracle, or maybe Underworld Breach and or Adnos. And yeah, I did end up winning this tournament, which was very cool. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy content like this, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It's completely free, and send this video to a friend if you found it interesting. Thanks, and watch out for my new videos.